even comedies today. They're still preferring to watch those on streaming platforms. And when that starts coming back, then the movie business will be healthy again.
Steven Spielberg, born on December 18, 1946, in Cincinnati, Ohio, is one of the most influential filmmakers in history, rising to fame with classics like Jaws, 1975, E.T., 1982, and Jurassic Park, 1993. Spielberg revolutionized blockbuster cinema. He has also directed powerful dramas such as Schindler's List, 1993, and Saving Private Ryan, 1998, earning multiple Academy Awards, beyond directing. Spielberg co-founded DreamWorks and has shaped the industry through storytelling that blends spectacle with deep emotion. His work continues to inspire generations of filmmakers and audiences worldwide. Steven Spielberg sees cinema not just as a career, but as a lifelong mission and passion. His favorite films are not simply good films, but works that have shaped his filmmaking style and soul. Spielberg's cinematic roots. After exploring the profound emotional and moral lessons Spielberg drew from cinema's greats, it is impossible not to highlight the one film that, in his own words, never left my mind. Lawrence of Arabia, directed by David Lean, was not just a movie he admired. It was the cinematic compass that influenced his vision for decades. Spielberg first saw it at the age of 16, in a theater whose widescreen seemed almost incapable of containing the vastness of Lean's desert landscapes. That day, he walked out not just entertained, but transformed. The experience was more than visual. Spielberg became entranced by how Lean used silence as power. In a world where most filmmakers rush to fill every moment with dialogue or music, Lawrence of Arabia dared to let the wind speak, to let a man's stare say more than pages of script. Spielberg would carry this lesson into his own work, crafting moments in Schindler's List, Saving Private Ryan, and Munich, where silence becomes the most deafening sound. The film's wide, sweeping shots of the desert, its golden sands stretching into eternity, taught Spielberg that scale was not just a matter of spectacle, but of storytelling. Lean's mastery showed him how a location could be as much a character as any actor, a silent witness to the struggles, triumphs, and contradictions of its human inhabitants. This influence is evident in Spielberg's use of expansive natural settings, whether it's the endless beaches in Saving Private Ryan or the open skies in Empire of the Sun. But perhaps the deepest mark Lawrence of Arabia left on Spielberg was in its portrayal of heroism. T.E. Lawrence, as depicted by Peter O'Toole, is no flawless icon. He is brave yet conflicted, visionary yet self-destructive, a man whose greatness is inseparable from his flaws. This complexity resonated with Spielberg, inspiring his own layered portrayals of protagonists who are both admirable and imperfect. It's why his Indiana Jones is reckless, his Captain Miller is haunted, and his Oscar Schindler is morally conflicted. Spielberg often refers to Lawrence of Arabia as his desert island movie, the one film he would choose to have if stranded alone. This is not hyperbole. In the 1980s, when the original negatives of the film began to deteriorate, Spielberg took part in the restoration process, working alongside Lean to bring the masterpiece back to its original glory. For him, this was not just an act of preservation, but of gratitude, a way of repaying the cinematic debt he owed. What makes this connection even more profound is how Spielberg internalized the film's ability to be both epic and intimate. Lean proved that a story could be painted on the largest canvas possible without losing the fine brushstrokes of personal emotion. For Spielberg, this became a guiding principle. No matter how large the scale, the human heart must remain at the center, even decades later. Spielberg speaks of Lawrence of Arabia with a kind of reverence usually reserved for sacred texts. To him, it is proof that cinema can transcend entertainment. It can be an experience that changes the course of a life. And in Spielberg's case, it did. The echoes of Lean's Desert Wind still whisper through his work, carrying the same blend of grandeur and humanity that first captivated him at 16. A Space Odyssey, after Lawrence of Arabia expanded his vision of cinematic scale. Steven Spielberg encountered another transformative experience with 2001, A Space Odyssey, 1968. Unlike most films, this was not a story he could fully understand in the traditional sense, and that was precisely what drew him in. Spielberg has openly admitted that the film's enigmatic nature was part of its genius. Stanley Kubrick didn't guide the audience through every question. Instead, he challenged them to live inside the mystery. For Spielberg, this was a revelation. Cinema didn't have to provide clear answers. It only had to be emotionally and sensorially true. This idea would later influence his own willingness to leave certain elements unexplained, allowing the audience to engage with his films on a deeper level. What fascinated Spielberg was Kubrick's audacity in fusing meticulous technical precision with an almost abstract, poetic form of storytelling. The cold, calculated elegance of Kubrick's vision stood in stark contrast to Spielberg's warmer, more emotional style. Yet the two directors shared a deep artistic connection. That bond was so strong that Kubrick eventually entrusted Spielberg with completing his long-conceived project AI, Artificial Intelligence. The echoes of 2001 are present throughout Spielberg's filmography. The awe and ambiguity of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the speculative futurism of Minority Report, and even the tonal duality of AI all bear the imprint of Kubrick's influence. Spielberg learned that science fiction could be more than spectacle. It could be a meditation on humanity, technology, and the unknown. In the end, 2001, A Space Odyssey remains, for Spielberg, far more than just a landmark in science fiction cinema. It stands as a profound and enduring reminder that the most powerful films aren't necessarily the ones that lay everything out clearly or offer easy answers. Instead, they are the ones that challenge the viewer, films that linger in the mind long after the credits roll. Not because they explained everything, but because they didn't. Spielberg has often expressed that what captivated him most about 2001 was its refusal to guide the audience step by step. It dared to provoke, to mystify, and to remain elusive. It left him, and generations of filmmakers and moviegoers, not with conclusions, but with questions. And it is precisely in that ambiguity that its emotional and artistic strength lies. For Spielberg, 2001 is not a puzzle to be solved, but an experience to be felt repeatedly, one that constantly reignites his curiosity and reaffirms that the cinema's greatest gift isn't clarity, but wonder. Where Spielberg's dreams began, if 2001, A Space Odyssey challenged Steven Spielberg's understanding of what cinema could be. A Guy Named Joe, 1943, was the film that first touched his heart and made him cry as a child. Directed by Victor Fleming, the wartime romantic fantasy told the story of a fearless pilot who dies in combat, only to return as a spirit tasked with guiding a young aviator who, in turn, falls in love with the pilot's former sweetheart. For the young Spielberg, it was a revelation. Here was a story that wove together heroism, loss, love, and the supernatural in a way that was both heartbreaking and uplifting. It planted the seeds of themes that would run through his work for decades. The idea that sacrifice could be noble, that hope could transcend death, and that unseen forces, whether spiritual or emotional, could shape our destinies. Spielberg has often recalled the way the film's ending left him both devastated and strangely comforted. It wasn't just the romance or the wartime setting, it was the humanity of the characters, the way they struggled with grief while still reaching for something greater. That emotional honesty stayed with him, influencing everything from E.T., the extraterrestrial, to Saving Private Ryan. So profound was the film's impact that Spielberg returned to it decades later, remaking it as Always, 1989. His version kept the core premise, but infused it with his own sensibilities. More warmth, more humor, and a contemporary setting, turning it into both a love story and a personal tribute to the film that had shaped him. For Spielberg, A Guy Named Joe was not just a movie, it was the first mirror he held up to his own emotions, the first time he realized cinema could reach into a person's soul. That awareness would guide his storytelling forever, reminding him that the most enduring films are the ones that make us feel, even through tears, that life is still worth living. Learning silence from The Godfather. If A Guy Named Joe was the first film to make Steven Spielberg cry, in 2001, A Space Odyssey expanded his sense of cinematic possibility. Then The Godfather, 1972, was the movie that humbled him to his core. Upon seeing Francis Ford Coppola's masterpiece for the first time, Spielberg admitted, "I thought I would never get to that level." It wasn't false modesty. It was the recognition of a piece of cinema so perfectly composed, so deeply human, and yet so chillingly restrained that it seemed almost untouchable. Spielberg was captivated by Coppola's fearless use of darkness, not just in the literal sense of low lighting, but in the moral and emotional shadows that draped every frame. The film rarely shouted. It whispered. Violence arrived suddenly but without spectacle, and the most memorable scenes were often the quietest. A father in a garden with his grandson, a man closing a door on his wife, a silent glance exchanged across a table. For Spielberg, who had built much of his early career on kinetic movement and dazzling visuals, The Godfather was a masterclass in slowing down, pulling back, and letting stillness speak. The silence in The Godfather wasn't empty. It was loaded with unspoken motives, threats, and grief. Spielberg later applied this lesson in his own work, most notably in Schindler's List, 1993, and Munich, 2005. In Schindler's List, the muted palette and extended pauses allowed audiences to absorb the horror without melodrama, echoing Coppola's ability to let restraint heighten emotion. In Munich, moments of quiet reflection between acts of violence gave the film a haunting weight, just as in The Godfather, where the violence was never gratuitous, but always consequential. Another element that struck Spielberg was Coppola's dedication to truth within fiction. The Godfather is operatic, but it never feels like artifice. Every gesture, every line of dialogue, every shaft of light through Venetian blinds served the story's psychological realism. Spielberg took this to heart, realizing that great cinema is not about showing everything you can. It's about showing only what's necessary. This meant resisting the urge to over-explain or over-stylize, trusting the audience to feel what isn't said. Perhaps most importantly, The Godfather reinforced for Spielberg the idea that character drives story. The Corleones' saga is not merely a crime narrative. It's a study of loyalty, corruption, and the slow erosion of innocence. Spielberg saw how Coppola's focus on the inner lives of his characters made the external plot more powerful, and he carried this into his own work, whether in the moral dilemmas of Bridge of Spies or the intimate father-son conflict in Catch Me If You Can. Even decades later, Spielberg still speaks of The Godfather with a mixture of awe and gratitude. It didn't inspire him to imitate Coppola. It inspired him to listen more closely to his own stories, to strip away the unnecessary, and to trust the shadows as much as the light. In learning to embrace silence and darkness, Spielberg found new ways to tell the truth, frame by frame. How one film changed everything. If The Godfather taught Steven Spielberg the art of restraint, then It's a Wonderful Life, 1946, reaffirmed his belief in why stories matter in the first place. Directed by Frank Capra, the film is not about technical mastery, elaborate set pieces, or visual spectacle. It's about the human heart. Spielberg has often said that this was the movie that made him believe in the sheer power of storytelling over technique. As a young man, Spielberg watched the tale of George Bailey, a small-town man pushed to the brink of despair, and he cried harder than he had ever cried in a theater. The scene that shattered him was when George, believing his life had no worth, stood on the snowy bridge contemplating ending it all. For Spielberg, it was not the camera movement or the lighting that made the moment powerful. It was the unflinching honesty of emotion. Capra's genius lay in stripping away everything that might distract from the core of the story, allowing the raw humanity to shine through. From It's a Wonderful Life, Spielberg learned a vital lesson. Hope is not naive, it's courageous. In the film, George's journey shows that the smallest acts of kindness and connection can ripple outward to change countless lives. Spielberg has carried this theme into much of his own work. In E.T., The Extraterrestrial, 1982, the friendship between a lonely boy and an alien becomes a testament to empathy and understanding. In Catch Me If You Can, 2002, the eventual reconciliation between father and son mirrors the film's belief in redemption and human connection. Perhaps the clearest echo of It's a Wonderful Life appears in The Fabelmans, 2022, Spielberg's semi-autobiographical film about his own childhood. Like George Bailey, the young Spielberg character wrestles with self-doubt and the weight of personal loss. Yet, through storytelling, both in life and in art, he finds purpose. The film becomes a quiet homage to Capra's belief that life's meaning is built from relationships, resilience, and the courage to keep going. What struck Spielberg most was Capra's refusal to treat hope as something soft or unrealistic. In It's a Wonderful Life, hope is born in the darkest hour, forged in struggle, and validated through the people who show up for us when we think we've lost everything. This is why the film has endured. It's not a fairy tale, but a recognition of life's hardships and the light we can still find within them. Decades later, Spielberg still speaks of It's a Wonderful Life with reverence. It didn't inspire him to mimic Capra's style. It inspired him to chase truth in his own way. Whether in the shadow of wartime tragedy in Saving Private Ryan or in the intimate, bittersweet resolutions of The Terminal, Spielberg has returned again and again to the lesson Capra taught, that stories matter most when they remind us of the value of a single life. Steven Spielberg's enduring legacy, from the lessons of It's a Wonderful Life to the technical marvels of Jurassic Park, Steven Spielberg's career has been a masterclass in balancing heart and spectacle. His legacy is not just the box office records or the Oscars, it's the emotional imprint his stories leave on generations. Spielberg has redefined what mainstream cinema can achieve, proving that blockbusters can be deeply human and that intimate dramas can resonate on a global scale. Beyond his films, his influence extends into the mentorship of younger filmmakers, the preservation of film history, and the creation of the Shoah Foundation to document Holocaust testimonies. He leaves behind not only a library of unforgettable movies, but also a blueprint for compassionate, purposeful storytelling. For Spielberg, true success is measured in the lives touched, the dreams inspired, and the belief, passed from Capra to him, that cinema can change the way we see the world. Cinema beyond just visuals. From the films that shaped his youth to the masterpieces he created. Steven Spielberg's journey proves one timeless truth. Cinema is not merely about images, it is about emotions. Each story that touched him left an imprint not only on his craft, but also on his character and heart. The movies that inspired Spielberg did more than entertain. They taught him empathy, wonder, and the courage to believe in hope. Unlike those who chase visual spectacle or box office glory, Spielberg has always pursued something deeper, the feeling that lingers after the credits roll, the spark of awe, and the quiet reminders of what makes us human. His work embodies the belief that film is a bridge between souls, carrying emotions across time and cultures. For Spielberg, the truest success is not measured in numbers, but in how a film can make someone's heart race, eyes well up, or spirits soar. After exploring Spielberg's cinematic inspirations, let's keep the discussion alive. Like, comment, and subscribe for more fascinating film stories.